Hi. Hi, everyone in all time
Uh,
zones around the world. Right?
True story. How's everyone doing?
Doing well, Kino. And here's our guest, Dr. Denise McDermott. Hello.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Yay.
Thank you.
I'd like to read a brief bio on Dr. Denise McDermott, whom we'll be calling Dr. Denise professionally and affectionately. This is from her website. Uh, Dr. Denise McDermott is a medical doctor, podcast host, producer, author, and paradigm progression pioneer. And she completed her adult psychiatry residency at Emory University and child psychiatry fellowship at the University of California, Los Angeles. And she was the acting chief fellow. She received in 2000 the Outstanding Physician Award at UCLA, and she's been president of the Southern California Psychiatric Society. In her private practice, she treats children, adults, as well as adolescents becoming adults. She's passionate about bridging science, spirituality, and mental wellness. And she has her own mental health website, drDeniseMD.com, reaching a global audience of over 300,000 on all social media platforms. She was amazingly a guest speaker at the Dalai Lama's Tibetan Medical Society in the fall of 2018, and where she lectured on nurturing children's mental health. And in 2020, she received Best of 2020 Adult and Child Psychiatrist in Redondo Beach and was honored as a top 100 health and fitness influencer. She has the where she interviews scholars, mental health advocates, athletes, and influencers, and was a finalist in the People's Podcast Awards in not only 2022, but 2023 and 2024 out of 8.1 million pool listeners in the Skeptic's Guide to Science and Medicine category. And I'm proud to share that I was also interviewed by Dr. Denise a couple of weeks ago on her podcast. And finally, she's also the author of Mental Health and How to Thrive. So, tremendous welcome to you, Dr. Denise, because I know that you have so much to contribute to talking back to suicide. So I'm just going to open the door wide open, right, to you wherever you would like to begin about this topic.
Well, I think first of all, it's such an honor to be here. And also, hello to all the viewers. It's lovely to meet you. I think the most important thing we can all do when we're starting a conversation, not just about suicide, but in any way, I like to lead into kind of a mind check and a mindscape. And from a frequency standpoint, I always like to say, start with gratitude. So I just want to say thanks to both of you, Kino and Dr. Kaufman, for all the love and kindness that you've done throughout your whole life, and all the viewers too, on thinking, feeling, acting towards anything to do for mental health and suicide prevention. So I think saying thank you and getting our own mind in a frequency of joy and gratitude is one of the most biggest things we can do to set ourselves up for a whole day of moment to moment success. And I think when we kind of lead into an awareness of this moment being the only moment we have, we can then do our own self regulation. So that's like almost like step one for happiness, step one for talking back to suicide. I always like to come up with things that are kind of like when you're a little kid and you're taught if you catch on fire, stop, drop, and roll. I like awareness, self love, and altruism. You have to have an awareness of your own mood state. You can be an active participant in your own feeling state. That's your awareness. Then you have to know your own unique sensory perception to have your own self love. And we've got to fill our cup first before we can help others. I've been guilty of putting other people's oxygen mask on first in my life. And I've just recently, I would say in the last 5 years, gotten a little bit better at making sure I fill my cup first. I think sometimes we have to know ourselves well. So first of all, I want to start with gratitude. Thank you. And just give you sort of a little bit of the window into just even mind prepping, just to be in this moment.
Yeah,
Mhm.
gratitude.
Yes.
That's a common word we've been hearing a lot over the last few weeks. On point. On point. And I love what you said about, all we have is this moment.
I'm thinking how here in the United States, next week is Thanksgiving Day, right? And have also been wondering at times how we balance grief and gratitude. Know if you might be able to speak a little bit to that. There's all types of losses and grief. And how
So
can we also balance that in some way?
well,
Integrate that with still being grateful.
wherever we are in the world right now, in the United States, we're all coming upon the holidays. And you mentioned Thanksgiving, gratitude, and grief. And I think a lot of times when we're going into the holidays, we think about family, loved ones, and friends. And grief is in many different ways. We can have grief of what I call living losses. People might be really sad if they have estrangement from family members. I know some people going into the holidays that don't have good relations with their family. And they're even, so grief can come in different ways. It could be grief of a relationship you wish you had with someone living here on the planet right now. It can be grief of a loved one that's passed away recently, or even it might feel like just 10 years ago. It might feel like that loss is still so very real. And so I think leaning into when we look at grief and gratitude, I think when we do focus on this moment, and it doesn't negate, I want to just empower everyone that all of your feelings are energy states. And once we start realizing that we're interacting almost like an infinity loop, if you imagine all of us here and us having a cartoon bubble, which is our thoughts and then our own reality of now, and you just do like an infinity loop and you pay attention to your feeling state. So if you're feeling grief, I like to say grief is very personal. People might feel it out of nowhere. They might hear a song. They might not get invited to something. They might be grieving a loss of a job. There's all kinds of grief. A pet. One of my best friends just lost both of her puppies. They were very lovely to be senior dogs, all within a week. I haven't seen her. I'm going to see her in December because her grief, she needed to go within. And I miss her, but that's honoring her grief. And I think with the holidays, if we want to get really succinct, I think sometimes if you're missing a relative, I know some people set a table setting. They might have someone's favorite food. Tomorrow, my father was born on November 20th. He's been passed away since 2011. I'm super blessed because my sensory perception style feels his presence. So even though he's not physically here, he guides me. And that's my unique interaction with someone that I love that's gone. And so I was even thinking as I was making my coffee this morning of telling my mom today, Mom, you should get Dad's favorite dessert. Or something. But people are at different stages of grief. And with the holidays, I think this is in general, this is advice for all year round. This goes back to awareness of your own frequency state in your mind. We have to have self-regulation. So whether we're having grief or a holiday event, today I was so honored to be here. And I prescribed myself time in nature before I came on your show. I didn't even know I was going to do this until I woke up because I let my inner guide and my intuition, I'm going to launch a little fast show this week called the 90-10. And 90-10 for me is 90% intuition and 10% logic and wisdom. So I almost get like excited about the day, like, oh, what am I going to do? I don't even sometimes know. I come at it with such a playful. I had no idea, even with this outfit that I have on, I found myself going out in my back garden and raking leaves. I just bought a new rake, and I was there with my garden gloves, and I thought, metaphorically, I'm tending to my garden, I'm tending to my mind. And I know my own neurostyle. I can get super excited and very talkative. So, like, whether it's the holidays, grief, gratitude, you have to have your own interaction and best friendship, that back to that bubble of infinity loop. So, you have to have self awareness. We've talked about that. So, I think in anything, any moment of now, I was like, oh my gosh, because I love to swim. I'm going to go to the pool tonight. And I'm like, what can I do? And I'm like, oh, I am going to rake some leaves. If you would have told me last night I was going to be raking leaves this morning, I would have been like, what? So I think the other thing too is once you start trusting your own inner voice, your own 90-10, and by the way, everyone's percentage of intuition and logic, I give everyone permission to do their own way. So I think grief is very personal, gratitude's very personal, and really tending to your own mindscape or your own garden and having your own self-awareness is really important.
In your
Wow.
describing some aspects of grief, I was also thinking, and this may be paradoxical, but also maybe not paradoxical, that I think grief can also come with great success. If a person achieves something that they're desiring or wanting, and yet it also leaves them feeling empty, I think that can also be a spiraling sense of grief too. And also around the holidays, thinking of those whose loved ones have died, missing them, right, on Thanksgiving, and especially for suicide loss survivors, what it's like to have the first, perhaps, Thanksgiving meal without their loved ones.
Absolutely. And I was just going to say, I really want to elevate and celebrate the concept of how to deal with grief with nostalgia. And I like to talk in terms of universal truths because we all have different belief systems. So I want to make sure I get back to like the suicide loss survivor specific topic you brought up. But I think we all have different belief systems. So at this moment of right now, my own unique, what I call I am awareness, is that I believe that we're energy beings and I'm in this human costume. And I like to talk about neurostyle and sensory perception. It's a concept I have, embrace your neurostyle and beyond. And it really honors and celebrates that we all sentient beings, process and perceive information in our own unique way. It's multidimensional and it changes moment to moment. And I like to talk about the fabulous 5: biological, psychological, social, cultural, spiritual, coupled with sixth sense intuition. So when you talk about grief, you talk about the holidays, you talk about gratitude, I think it's really important that we start to view one another as like these amazing, amazing, reverent beings. And we all have different belief systems. And we often, without even knowing it, we mirror and put our belief systems onto others without stopping and saying, well, what does grief mean to you? What does nostalgia mean to you? Are you ready to talk about this? I think some tips and tools for like a first holiday with the loss of someone, whether it is a suicide loss, whether it's homicide, whether it's an illness, whether it's a tragedy, you really have to have a lot of grace and look at the family system. And everyone's going to have they're going to be at different timestamps of grief. And what does that look like? So even I'd love to hear from each of you, maybe if it works, of what grief would look like for you, or an example, or if anything that I'm saying, how we can interact with that topic.
What are your thoughts? You're listening deeply.
I'm blown away. You got so much energy, so much spiritual energy. I feel like I'm a listener right now. I'm like taking so much from this, on what you're saying. And And that's such an important question. Like, what does grief really mean to a person? What does it mean? Like, what does it mean for me? Like, I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't even know how to answer. Like, what does grief mean to me? So I'm just going to go back to the last time I lost someone close in my life who was one of my best friends, and he was murdered. He was 21 years
Wait,
old.
time out, time out, time out. What was his name?
Niren.
Niren?
Niren, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
wait, just by the
Niren.
way, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No, it's cool.
the way my sensory perception is, whenever I hear of someone that's passed away, I like to say their name. And then for
Right,
me, I
right.
get energy hits right away. So I'm gonna just my sensory perceptions beyond just this human costume. So Naren is 21. And right when you just said his name, can you say it again 2 more times?
Niren. Niren.
Okay. Now I can't prove this scientifically, but I get different energy chill patterns for different souls that are on and off Earth. So keep talking. So I just want to send love. I got
Wow.
lots of power. So right when you said his name, I got like lightning bolt, and he's still like, I'm still right here. It's a different sensory perception. Both of my arms are shooting up, and I'm feeling like a lot. So I just wanted to put my hand on my heart. Everyone has different sensory awareness. So I just want to honor your dear friend. Keep going. I won't interrupt now.
Wow. You're truly amazing. I just want to say that one more time. Yeah. So for me, at the point of finding out that I lost him, grief for me was more of I was angry, if we can put that down to like my grief was coming out as anger. As anger. But also I felt myself that I wasn't a good enough friend as well. Or in this way we were so close that we were actually brothers. So for in my own personal way, I also had like a lot of regrets. Could I have done more? That was part of my grief. Could I have been there for him? Was something going on in his life, and was I so caught up in my own life that I even forgot to even ask, "Hey, Niren, how are you doing? Are you okay?" I was aware that he was going through a tough period with his family and so on. And then to get a phone call to say, look, he's gone. So it was like my grief for me was anger, but not only anger at what happened to him, but also anger towards myself. So I'm just, yeah.
Well, I'm asking you right in this moment of now. Can you? I don't know. By the way, I know this is my first time meeting you. I've met Diane before, so if I ask you anything and it's too much, please let me know.
No, I love to be fully transparent. So go
What if you
ahead
were
and
to
ask.
put your hand on your heart right now?
Okay.
Because this is
Like just
something we
one
can
hand.
do wherever you
Yeah, yeah.
want.
Yeah,
And then
okay, like just
take
one
a
hand.
deep breath. And like imagine sending yourself love, or imagine him forgiving you or you forgiving yourself, because that's a feeling state and it's real. And right when you told me that your friend was murdered, I all of a sudden had you can see I almost started to cry, because I went back to the feeling state of what it would have felt like the first time you found that out. So I'm taking the energy of this moment of right now, the only moment we all have, and reminding we had multiple feelings. We had happiness a little while ago, then we heard the word murdered. There might be other people listening that had a family member murdered. So if you want to put your hand on your own heart, take a deep breath, because we're still in this human costume, and physiologically send ourselves love. And then it's very personal grief. If after the show you want to write a letter to him, you might believe that there is an afterlife or there's not an afterlife. Even if you don't believe, it's therapeutic to write a note to that person, I believe. And you can do that with people that are alive. I've done that before, where I've gone to send emails. I'm like, don't send it though. Just, it's okay in the universe. Like energetically, they're getting it. So how are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling relieved, feeling relieved I don't know how
His
to really describe it.
Did he ever come to you in a dream, or does he give you any signs or symbols that he's watching over you?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I mention his name every day. I mention his name every day in my prayers. I'm also quite spiritual, so I do bring him up a lot. I take him as a guardian angel. I feel that he has forgiven me,
I'm getting that
as the years have unfolded.
right when you started talking, I got that same, I can't prove this. I got a very, really happy, like it's going still through my arms, but it's like a feeling, it's an elation. So, whatever you're saying, my sensory perception of hearing you is getting some sort of happy validation that I believe may or may not be his spirit saying, yeah. So, I can't prove it, but this is just interesting how we all talk about feeling states or things that we can't see.
Yeah, but I believe you. I believe you. I know, many people out there won't believe this, but I believe you. What you feeling right now, I do believe you. Like,
We're having
yeah,
our own unique, and I think what's so neat is if we remember to have tolerance because we're all at different, our own awareness is exactly perfect. So you feel like he's your guardian angel?
yes. Like I feel, that he's with me all the time. And even though this happened in 2014, and even though so many years after that, I still had so much regret, which I feel like was my, grief. If because we talk about grief now, that was it. But I felt like he did forgive me, or he actually didn't have anything against me to start off with, you know. And that for me was like grief talk, putting down to anger, like anger to, yes, okay, what happened to you? I was angry that I couldn't be there for you. And I just lived with that for so long, and how do I deal with this? And then I started off, doing charitable work under his name for him. People pinned it and labeled it as, I'm doing it because I wasn't there. People were talking and saying those things. And I kept thinking to myself, is that true? Am I doing it out of regret, or am I doing it because I want to make sure his name continues and build a legacy for him? you know.
Or
So
all of
each
the
and every
above?
single day, yeah, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him, that I don't mention him, that I don't speak out to him to watch over me, you know, because we were relatable in that way. So whatever I'm going through in my life, I felt like he was the one person that knew, what's up. I feel you. I know what you're talking about, no matter what the topic was about. So yeah. So grief to me was
Wow.
just anger,
I'm kind of
you know.
blown away with gratitude towards your own authenticity of sharing such a deep and personal story for all of us. And I feel like I've just
Yeah.
learned so much from hearing your grief process. And it also gives me hope that even when our family members or friends aren't here with us, they live in our hearts, whether it's through activism, through something that we do. And I think it's really neat for people to think about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I wasn't expecting this, but this was, yo, this was deep. This was deep, but impactful in a
Wait,
positive
should we
way.
say
So yeah,
thank you to him 3 times? I
thank
like
you for him,
what's his first name again? I don't want to say it wrong.
Niren.
Niren,
Niren.
Niren,
Yeah.
Niren. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's another thing I
Niren,
like
thank
to
you.
do. Yeah. So, like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
playing
Yeah.
sports, you might hit the ball like 3 times and shoot the free throw. I think we all have to have our own rituals, no matter what our belief system is, to like open up a door and then shut the door. For me, that's really important. You could see I had no idea. Like I said, I was going to rake the leaves today, or I was always going to have these chills, right? And so I had to learn how to self-regulate with different boundaries for self-awareness, because we all have our own sensory perception. So I'm such a love bug that I have to look at my day and then like plan and like do little self-care tips so that it doesn't get emotionally overwhelming to be on earth, whether it's talking about grief, whether it's opening up my social media. I even like told myself I have a regulation for that right now. So I just wanted to say, like, we just honored your dear friend We honored your remembrance of him. And the other tip in the tool in the toolbox I'd like to offer the audience is whether you're talking about grief or something exciting, mind prep, like pause. And then when you go to the next moment, you're kind of ready for that moment. So whatever topic you want to talk about, because sometimes if we're so busy and so stressed, we all the feelings can bleed in at once, and that to me can be overwhelming. And maybe this is a good segue into like really intense depression, really intense grief, feeling states that are so hopeless, where it's all coming at someone, where maybe it's hard to do some of these tips, right?
Yeah. I feel so like relieved right now, you know?
Oh,
Like I mean, this happened in 2014. So say, okay, 10 years later, like for the first time in 10 years, I've actually communicated with someone who I'm now meeting for the first time virtually who gets it. Like I feel so, like there's this heavy weight just been lifted,
oh,
like I can talk to someone about it, how I was feeling at the time, how I felt so many years later, how I could have still been feeling an hour ago, but like I feel like, someone now gets it and is
well,
assisting me and helping me in just letting this, go
wow.
and
Well, I just want
honoring
to.
his presence.
I'm still
Like,
taking this all in, and I want to with humility say that we all have access to our feeling states and the possibility of multiple dimensions. And the reason why I have tears is I have tears of joy for being invited to your show. I have tears of joy that Diane, Dr. Kaufman's been on my show, because you guys are resonating at a frequency that's so kind and loving. And I've been almost like hiding a little bit. I was about to have like a confession to the world. There's been so many years where I couldn't be my true, like I've done a nice job with that little bio that you read. But I feel like it's just the beginning, because I have other sensory gifts and the world hasn't been ready for them. And I really want to stay as a still, I feel very, very proud that I went to medical school in Western medicine. But like I said, I'm more 90-10, 90% intuition, 10% that. And I think when someone's having bipolar symptoms, anxiety symptoms, depression symptoms, the most creative people, musicians, artists, poets, people are accessing other levels of sensory perception. And we haven't been able yet. We're starting to like, thank you, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Thank you, Deepak Chopra. Thank you, the Dalai Lama. Thank you, all the ascended masters. Thank you, past, present, and future scientists, doctors, spiritual leaders, creative types, for coming together at this moment of now and what I call love all kind. Love all kind. I'll say it one more time. Love all kind. I wrote a mission statement to the universe August 18th, 2015 about love all kind. And for me, when I wrote the words onto paper, because words, thoughts, and actions carry a vibrational frequency, just like in music or in art or poetry, I wrote a shout out to the universe, and I imagined beyond what the human mind could imagine. And I wrote love all kind. Then I wrote all sentient beings. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And then I started writing humans, age groups, dogs, people. And so I wrote this very succinct kind of shout out about being of service to help activate people to be their own best friend and to lead them back to themselves. There's nothing wrong with seeing a doctor. There's nothing wrong with seeing a spiritual leader. There's nothing wrong with admiring your teacher or your best friend or your family member. But I think one of the biggest lies of modern day times is that we believe that the answers are outside of ourselves. And so I'm getting
yeah.
taken back, that I feel like I can actually be my authentic. Maybe I've decided recently that I haven't been doing a lot of video content. I'm going to start doing more of it, because that's like part two of another show of some trauma that I went through, where someone found me on social media and targeted me. And I feel like we all ask to experience, and I'm not trying to say anyone wants to experience their friend dying from murder, but the way I understand the universe is that every moment is like in some sort of divine plan. And then it's how we alchemize things from a feeling state. So I want to take ownership that this moment with both of you, where Dr. Kaufman asked the question about grief and thanksgiving and gratitude, has now gone to this place, that I'm ready to step even more into who I really am and how I show up for my patients, my son, the world. But I think we've got to be mindful of what platforms we're on too, because one minute you can be on a platform and then the next minute you can get canceled. So you have to like kind of navigate I call it the earth game with grace. And now I feel like I need to calmly be quiet and let one of you talk.
Well, personally, I'm enjoying you talking.
I know, but I have to tell you, I have some self-awareness. Like when I get really excited, I can talk really fast or a lot. And so that's why I went out to the garden. And then I even took off my shoes. I don't know what I was doing. I never got in the garden with like a regular outfit on. It would normally be like a garden outfit, right? And I had no idea because I opened up the rake and I'm like, Denise, look at your day. You've got this many patients later. You've had emergencies for the last 6 weekends. This is a very wonderful time to be with these lovely humans. Ground yourself. So I went out to the garden and I grounded myself. So it would be like your own doctor being your own doctor to yourself. So that's what I was going to say with your own cartoon bubble that you all have. I invite you all to start being in the moment of now and creating your own cartoon bubble dialogue with yourself. And if you're open to it, remember this moment's now, and we have access to other dimensions. It's as much as our mind wants to go. And we can have access to our relatives that are here, past, present, and future. And we can do the healing work at any time and at our own pace. Not no one else's pace. That's why I said grief is very personal. Okay.
Dan,
Yeah,
how do you define grief?
or when I, sort of spontaneously, but also inspired by what you had said, Dr. Denise, had brought up the idea of grief and gratitude and thanksgiving. Little did I know consciously that I was also speaking very personally. And now I'll share a bit about grief. That my mother's birthday was just a few days ago, and her funeral was a few days after her birthday. This goes back a number of years ago.
What's her name?
My mom's name is Rebecca.
Okay, Rebecca.
Right. So I remember that I had spoken to my mother by phone the day before something happened. And it was going to be her 80th birthday. And my mother was planning a big birthday party. And I remember I had bought something for her, of course. And we had a telephone conversation about, I guess, coming out for her birthday. And the next day, I received a call from my sister. And I remember my daughter had just closed the front door. She had just left, maybe to be with some friends. So as the door was closing, the telephone was ringing. And I picked it up, said goodbye to my daughter, picked up the phone. It was my older sister saying that my mother had been killed in a car accident. And I can remember collapsing to the floor, screaming and sobbing. And then I guess within a day or two, I was going to Long Island, to be with my family and my dad. I think if I remember right, because I think severe shock and trauma can blank out our memory. I think that her funeral was like the day her birthday party was going to be. Um,
Yes.
and I have no memory at all of Thanksgiving. In fact, I just thought of that right now, like, oh, there was Thanksgiving after that. Like, what happened? Um, I can remember in one of the years past that, that my dad and I shared that we had both bought my mother a birthday card on, on her birthday. And, shared warmly with each other about that. What the story of the car accident was that it was like daylight, it wasn't at night. It was at a commonly traveled road that my mom had been on many times. She apparently was making a left turn. She might have done something inadvertently wrong when she was making this left turn, and a truck plowed into her. And kind of trigger warning here on the autopsy, my dad, well, I think my sister originally read the autopsy report, and then I think shared it with my father. But it's like every bone in my mother's body was broken. That's what I was told, or what my sister was told. So it was really a horrifying, death. And for a while, I used to imagine that she had been murdered. I don't know, that maybe because of the violence of the death. I, was thinking of it that way. And even recently, I think I used to think about this so much, right? But this goes back many years ago now. But even just the other day, and it had been quite a while since I had thought about the death, I was thinking how I had never met the people that were driving the car, right? That they were critical. Of course, what my mother did when driving was critical, but they also were critical in, killing her in the car when driving it. But that they were like a missing, like imagery of the story, that there was no contact with them in any way. So I think that's another kind of death, that and a sudden death, like a shocking death, where it's almost like an open-ended. I mean, it's like it closed in terms of, but as far as like closure per se, I really don't think that I'm there. I think that maybe my grief is ongoing.
So I have a question for you. Number one, hand on my
Yeah.
heart and so much love to you and the loss of your mom, Rebecca. What year was that?
It was
How old?
it was a few months after 9/11.
Oh, wow. And then so from your own personal way of this, just like Kino shared, I know we all have different friend groups. We have different ways we are in denial of things. Sometimes PTSD comes out of nowhere. So for you personally, a couple of questions. One, did you end up meeting the people? It was an accident, correct?
Oh, yes, it was an accident. Mhm.
Okay. So I know you said it's open-ended, but I know forgiveness is very personal. And sometimes it's like people have forgiveness if they have like a higher power or don't have a higher power, or it's the human person and maybe this is too much. Maybe this is part two on another show we do on
Yeah.
deep dive forgiveness. But where are you at some of those crucial moments, and like maybe anyone you went to speak with or a close friend or anything you've done, or has your mom come to you in dreams? My father came to me 6 weeks after he passed away. I can't prove it, but it was those dream visitations. And he looked exactly like him. He loved the Chicago Bears and from the Midwest. He had his sweatshirt on, and I could even see his hand. It was really wild. And then I could see him just with a lot of people talking. It wasn't a white tunnel. It was just almost like a lot of people all there together chatting. I don't know what that meant or didn't mean. But when I woke up, I was like, oh my gosh, that was my dad. So it was a real clear dream visitation. And I don't want to say I felt when he got diagnosed with cancer, his situation was different. He was diagnosed with cancer in June of 2011 and passed away September of 2011. So it went really fast. And I was super fortunate that I had such a close relationship with him without any unfinished business. So, meaning anything I was ever upset with him or anything when I was little, he was able to, well, not little, when I was 11, he was able to get sober from alcoholism. I had gone with him when he was in his AA meetings. I went to Alateen, and I even told him, I told mom she should divorce you if you didn't stop drinking. Like I would have these like little missed conversations with him. And so and then he always encouraged me. He got sober. So we were blessed to have like a very kind of unfinished business, because also in the 6 weeks, I made sure I wrote him a letter and I got to tell him all these loving things. And it didn't mean I wasn't so sad when he passed away, but then after he passed away, I felt like he was with me. And so it wasn't that I didn't have grief, but it was unbelievable because you don't know until someone's gone all the different feelings or what you're going to believe until you're there. So I just felt like, oh my God, is there something wrong with me? Like, of course, I wish he was here on earth. I wish I could hug him or talk with him. But it just felt like he's such a big part of me, whether you want to call him my guardian angel. You know, he comes, I had the dream visitation. There's times when really amazing things happen, and I perceive that the butterfly that comes is like him going wink, wink. So this is why grief and nostalgia and the way, whether it's someone that was an accident, murdered, cancer. So there's so many different feeling states around how much we love the person. Maybe we had unfinished business or not. That's why grief is just, even the word grief is so general compared to what we've all just decided to share today. So, okay, can you answer though for you?
Before I respond, Dr. Denise, say your father's name out loud.
I love it. John Check. Love you, Dad. Thank you for getting sober. What, by the way, my father getting sober rocks, because he gave us the gift of a healing. And I believe that we're here in this earth costume, but that we have generational trauma that could be stored in our own DNA and our cellular DNA. And when someone does their own work, all of us, when we tend our own garden, our own mind, our own human vessel, it creates a ripple effect for everyone that's with us, I believe, here in the earth form, and ripple effects allegedly from the Native Americans 7 generations before or not, can't prove, but just it's a huge thing in our own ascension. So John, check. John. Thanks, Dad, for getting sober.
I read an article about that yesterday, about how trauma is passed through a bloodline, you know? But the article was around anxiety and like how we can take anxiety these days as something negative happening to us, but it can also be something positive. And the article goes on to say about how it's passed through the bloodline, that the trauma or the anxiety you may be feeling in this present time, you know, could be going back generations. Hence why you going through it now. And now you just have to sort of like reprogram that for yourself to change that. So, so true.
And so that's why I like Embrace Your Neuro Style and Beyond. And that we all process and perceive information in our own unique way. And when I say we, I mean beyond the we that we can imagine. I mean, we humans, we animals, we sentient beings. And I don't even like the word alien. I use the word all kind, AK, love all kind, because my current understanding of the universe keeps growing, that there's a possibility that we're all energy beings and we're all part of one beautiful cosmos of different energy beings, but we're presenting in the human form. And so when you talk about an article about ancestral trauma, I think it's so loaded. It's multidimensional, biological, psychological, social, cultural, spiritual, and then the unseen sixth sense intuition. And I like to keep it really 3D easy, because when we say stop, drop, and roll, we can all relate to that. If we say embrace your neurostyle and beyond, that we all process and perceive things in our own unique way, multidimensional, moment to moment, it doesn't hurt anyone's feelings. Every moment right now, everyone's like, oh my gosh, there's racism, there's politicalness, there's sexual, there's so much that when we start talking, the words that we can use can cut people off from really accepting what someone else has to say. By the way, I know we have to still go back to you, Dr.
Yeah,
Kaufman.
yeah.
But I feel like if we even start to pay attention, because we're all, oh, one incredible important thing about the concept and being aware of how we speak is that our words, thoughts, and actions, I believe, carry a vibrational frequency. And the more neutral we can be, and the less judgmental we can be, the more we integrate and we can become our own unique best version of ourselves at that moment. So these are universal truths: awareness, self-love, altruism. All sentient beings go through moments of crisis, stabilization, and thrive. Even in this interview, there's moments when we've been peppy and happy. Then we're like, oh, we're discussing murder. Oh, we're discussing an accident. So we can be smiling one minute, then another minute about to cry. So we're like these amazing, like, feeling bomb exchanges. And imagine the minute we all log on to all of our social media or our devices, right? It's like, dun, 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 energy, access, 8,200,000 souls. Ah! And if we don't realize that we could be possibly having many feeling states at once, we can feel like exhausted. Okay, so we've got to get back to Dr. Kaufman and her mom, though.
Yeah.
I think a way that I've been able to grieve is to express myself creatively. And 10 years ago, when my daughter had her first baby, Nori, while I was with them, I started to remember a story that I had written many years before, which was called Missing Mommy.
Oh.
So here I am with my daughter, who has just become a mother, right? And I've just become a grandmother. And I'm thinking about also this story that I wrote so many years ago. And the story was related to when I was medical director of a crisis unit at University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey in Newark. I tragically, I met a grandmother who brought in her granddaughter, a young child, and the father had murdered the mother. And when I asked the young girl for her magic wishes, she said to me that she wanted to either she said, I want to fly on the back of a bird to see my mother again, or I want to grow wings to fly to see my mother again. And I ended up writing her a story, and in which a little girl, that in the story is named Layla, that's not her real name, where she's missing her mother died, her mother's in heaven, and she misses her, and she has a magic dream. And in the magic dream, she sees her mother again. And then when she wakes up, she's triumphant because she saw her mother, and she asks her grandmother, who's a good listener, did it really happen? And then her grandmother recites to her a beautiful poem about love, which includes, like, love is the reason, angels have wings, love is the reason all birds sing, right? That's their song. And the grandmother says how much the mother loved, the girl, and that they love each other. And at the end of the story, the grandmother and the little girl are embracing, and they're crying, missing mommy and missing the daughter, but also loving each other. And the story ends with the girl feeling safe and feeling loved. And the last line is that the tears on her face glistened like jewels. So I had written that story so many years ago and had given it to the grandmother, saying, one day, if you think this might help, your granddaughter. and in parenthesis, I didn't say to her, or you, right? That you can give it to the child, saying that it was written just for her, which was true. So decades go by, and here I am in Portland, Oregon, missing my mommy, right? And amazingly, this is one of those cosmic things. I looked on Upwork for an artist, and out of all the 20, 30 people that submitted artwork, the artist that I chose lived in Portland, Oregon, and I ended up meeting her and having tea together before I flew back to New Jersey. And the illustrations are absolutely beautiful. It's a beautiful story. And in sharing this now, I think that there's that resonance of love and loss between people and experiences, and also time dimensions, because here was that story. Maybe it's a primordial story of love and loss, right? That was real, but also mythic in a way. And that story came back to me, right? And what was I doing? A combination of celebrating life, but also new life, right? New life for my daughter as a mother, my now baby granddaughter, Nori, but also missing my mother. It was just interesting how that all came together. And I think in part of maybe who I am, I need that creative dimension to be able to process my feelings.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I always like to say creativity fuels the soul. And soul means different things to different people. But let's even just look at addiction or a mental health suffering. Oftentimes people can feel very emotionally cut off from their playful self if you're having depression, sadness, or anxiety. And so when you're in touch with your inner child and you're playing, and that's why I even got a kick out of it. I'm like, why am I building a rake? You had to take it out of the Amazon box and build the rake. Not that it takes rocket scientists to do it, but I'm like, what are you doing? And so then I had like a little playful step. So when you're writing your beautiful story, or if someone's healing through their songwriting or poetry, or maybe making the most amazing holiday dinner, if you're a master alchemist with cooking, I like to have, just the little things we do, they're very healing, and we have a more joyful state when we alchemize a feeling state of grief, sadness, sorrow, or loss, and we let ourselves have the feeling. That's really important. It doesn't mean sometimes we don't deny ourselves of our feelings and we open up that drawer later. But once we can go into that suffering drawer, into that grief drawer, and then use our own form of creative play or happiness, I feel like that's where we can have more inner peace around the holidays. We don't have to feel as lonely. We can still have the feelings of grief, practice nostalgia, your favorite story about someone as though they're there. You can do their favorite meal. And then if you're just sad, like, I love the story. And also, we also heal the most, I believe, when we're using as many sensory input as we can. And then when we help others, when we lean into compassion and remember we're not alone. So whether we lost someone to a murder or to an accident or to cancer
or to suicide.
Yes. That there's other people that have lost. The thing that, now that you mentioned suicide, I have another confession. Lots of confessions. I love the name Hold On Campaign because I always say, stay on earth. I've been, throughout all the years as an adult and child psychiatrist, it's just the reality of the work that you've done and I've done, Dr. Kaufman. You were also an adult and child psychiatrist. And I feel like the word, I don't know if it's just I innately knew, that if you say something, you can manifest it. So I wasn't afraid to say suicide ever. But with my clients, once I knew and I asked the doctor question from the Western medicine costume, have you ever had suicidal thoughts? Have you ever had a plan? You're doing like the suicide assessment, which I want to give some updated science on that too. Then once I did like the normal evaluation and looked at someone, made sure I was doing my good Western medicine CAP, major depression, bipolar, safety, suicide, I immediately would then figure out ways for people to stay on earth. And I feel like the world's, luckily, I would say in the last decade, we have a long way to go. I still like, even when you said the word or suicide, and then I think of the Hold On campaign, or I think Stay on Earth, we still have to, I feel like we still need to do really a lot better on helping with the shame around suicide. And we need to really help as many of our kindred spirits that are here on earth, all ages, all backgrounds, for finding reasons to live. And we need to then have, I like the Hold On campaign name. I love that because it's like, oh my God, hold on campaign, stay on earth. So it's very positive. It's a positive reframe, which I think is really important. When I first started out doing initially kind of throwing myself over the cliff and going on social media, I never even used the word suicide. I think I even had stigma about saying I was a psychiatrist because I felt like I was so much more than a psychiatrist. And I am so much more than that. But they are important words to bridge, to have really difficult discussions. So I think,
Dr. Denise, I have a question for you. So earlier, you've mentioned several times having awareness, right? What if in a emotionally distressed state of mind, whether that's from a psychiatric illness or someone has been raped, financially, I don't know, devastated, or some terrible life stressor, whatever the reason is, they're in extreme pain, right? And their idea of their own awareness is life is horrible, it's not going to get better, I'm nothing, or I'm something, but nobody will ever appreciate me. And it's, you talk about like the cup, like your cup has to be filled, that the cup itself is broken, is shattered, right? The awareness is of such bleakness and darkness that the person is thinking, feeling, I have to escape this pain, and the only way is to kill myself. So their awareness in that moment is that, right? How would you help address that with that person?
Well, for me personally, giving generalized advice on a show like this is, I'll tell you how I maybe give you a couple examples.
Yeah, and of course,
Well,
this is a general question.
Suicidal thoughts are very personal. So if I, as a doctor, in my doctor role, and then we can maybe talk about how to help people from a media standpoint. But first of all, I want to thank anyone that's listening to this that's ever, and you especially, I was actually giving you, I'm going to answer your question, but even in prepping for this show and I was gardening, I was thanking your younger version of you, Dr. Kaufman, for staying on earth. So I went back in time and I was like, oh, I'm so glad she stayed. So I get to do the show today because I got to interview you and hear your story of when you were in medical school and you were contemplating suicide.
But I attempted suicide and fortunately survived.
Correct. So I feel like in that, so if you're asking me the question, it would be the moment if someone told me that. Of course, the linear basics of safety are just like 911. If you are a family member, a friend, a doctor, and someone gives you, the other individual tells you they have a suicide plan and they're going to act on it, and there's nothing you could say to them in that moment of absolute despair That is the equivalent of getting oxygen on someone's mask. You have to, then at that moment, if you hear that, you need to, if you're with them, you need to say, I love you, I care about you. We need to call 911. We need to get you to the
Call 988.
988. But 988 is great, but if you're actually at that
Oh,
absolute
absolutely. Yeah.
time, this or the pills, you call 988, you call 911, and you get into a professional environment to keep you safe. Because if you get to that point, there's no holding back. People really will try to act on it. And I will tell you, how have I handled it recently? I've had 6 weekends in a row of people that have had suicidal ideation. And I'm actually very much known for the doctor that can tolerate a lot outpatient to help people choose to stay. So I'm very personal, I'm very caring. My style as a doctor, intuitive, whatever beingness you want to call me, is very personal, very caring. And for some reason, whatever sacred space I open up, people end up going deeper. And then we then look at their emotional regulation and look at their cognitive rigidity versus their cognitive flexibility. And then we come up with a multidimensional plan of, first of all, step one is, are you safe enough to be outpatient? Or do you need to go to partial hospitalization? Do you need to go to the hospital? You have to also assess someone's chronicity of, do they have low-grade passive suicidal ideation for many years? What's their unique neurostyle in the Western medicine? Do they have ADHD? Do they have bipolar, schizophrenia, addiction? Did they just lose a family member? Did someone else they know just die? So you have to build the context around someone that's thinking about leaving the planet. And then you have to come up with a multi-tiered approach to helping them to figure out how to stay on Earth, how to hold on. It's very personal. And I was really honored to just interview Dr. Craig Bryan of Ohio State. He's a PsyD, and Dr. Justin Baker, PhD, who is the lead investigator at Ohio State. The article just came out in JAMA Open, Journal of American Medical Association, the first randomized controlled study of cognitive behavioral therapy, short cognitive behavioral therapy, 10 to 12 sessions. And step one was helping people with emotional regulation.
And this was telehealth, yes?
Yeah, telehealth. And it was in a 3-tiered approach. So because of the pandemic, so many people have started doing more telehealth. Now, a lot of people are going back and seeing their doctors in person, but we need to have the data. So in this specific study, there was a 3-tiered process, 10 to 12 sessions, 1 hour each week, and it was very suicide focused. And so step one, the part of the treatment was the emotional regulation, helping people to have an awareness, back to that word awareness, of what all their emotional states are. Sometimes people just act on their feelings without being aware of their feeling states. They're not naming it to claim it. I feel enraged, I feel sad, desperate, I feel despair. So step one's the emotional regulation. Number two was the thought process. And they specifically in this study talked about suicidal beliefs. They went deeper into the actual, what are your own unique beliefs around suicide? And I can give an example. I remember one girl I knew since she was 17 in my practice that came back during the pandemic when she was in her mid-20s. And when she was in her throes of suicidal ideation, her specific suicide beliefs were that the world would be better off without her. She couldn't even see past the fact. It was at such the point, she was like, why am I? And then at that point, I was very fortunate because I knew her already and I knew her parents, and she's an adult. So I asked her permission because we deemed that she wasn't going to act on it. So she was safe enough to stay outpatient. But I asked, could we please have a meeting with your parents? And her parents then gave her all the reasons why they loved her and why she was better off staying on Earth. She was still in despair, and her unique situation required more than just cognitive behavioral therapy. Her unique situation did require medicine plus cognitive behavioral therapy. So if you're having suicidal thoughts, it's also very personal. You have to work with your professional group of people. So then once you get through that thought process and help go, so step one is, the emotional regulation. Step two is the thought process and your suicidal belief system. Then step three in the telehealth study was prevention, like response and relapse prevention, and having people imagine if they end up having their unique suicidal belief systems or suicidal plan, all the ways they have tools in the toolbox after already feeling that way before, to going back and like, who should I call for help? Is it 988? Do I need to call my doctor? Do I need to call a nurse practitioner? Do I need to call my spiritual leader? What is my own unique 911 or 988 plan? And can I stay on earth? In the last 6 weekends, sometimes people have really bad experiences at hospitals, like really bad. Sometimes, and this is really sad, when you are feeling suicidal and if you go into the emergency room and there's times when you get the best care ever, you've got the best social worker, the best triage nurse, the best ER doctor, the best psychiatrist, and you have a great experience and it's very hopeful to go into the ER. But a lot of times I have people experience traumatic events at hospitals. So some of the times when people, like a recent situation, someone was referred to me, they were so traumatized by their hospitalization that even though they were still feeling very suicidal, they thought it was even worse to go to the hospital. So I was just faced with a very challenging situation, which I'm blessed because of all my years of expertise, because of my loving heart and the way I talk to this was because I work with children, teens, and adults. I basically came up with a plan. We came up with, can you really be outpatient? What do we need help from the school environment? Do you need to be homeschooled? Is this even feasible? And that person felt so listened to and heard, but then they did need to get a higher level of care into partial hospitalization. They might end up needing to be hospitalized, but there's also different plans and different suicidal plans. You're also in a different, suicide's very personal, just like we said. So I gave different scenarios. So you really want to have a multi-tiered approach. And when someone's at that awareness of despair, hopelessness, and there's cognitive rigidity, and they only think that the world's better without them, and if they can't contract for safety with their family member, their friend, their doctor, their nurse, then they have to be hospitalized. If they have,
I'd add in there too, if they have a weapon, if they have a gun at home and aren't willing to remove that from the house.
1000% yes. 1000% yes. So I personally had no idea when I said yes to this interview that I was going to have 6 weekends in a row. That is an outlier because I'm not the director of an inpatient unit where everyone comes in suicidal. I'm in Manhattan Beach private practice, and I have people that are thinking about suicide. Usually 1 or 2 people in my practice has kind of got chronic, low-grade passive suicidal ideation that's more complex. But to have this level of acute emergencies, for me, I even though I'm very positive, I wore my little pink outfit today, I I've been more fatigued lately, even though I've been eating healthy and I look well rested because I love so hard. I'm as a doctor, and I don't know how long our show's going to be today, but I have all these self-care tools that I have to do when I'm the one that's helping someone to figure out how to stay on earth or how to hold on. It's emotionally very intense, especially if you're highly empathic and you care. So hope I answered your question.
That's true.
Thank you. Thank you.
Like what you said, like the more you care, it also takes a toll on you,
Yes.
just as much. The more love and
Yes.
care you have for someone who's going through something or has suicidal thoughts, it does take a toll on you as well. So not only do you have to like deal with, the person, but also keep yourself, motivated and strong, psychologically strong. It's not easy. It's not easy.
I'm a mermaid. I'm a mermaid, confession. I'm blessed because I live in Southern Cal and I'm in a gated community. And one of the highest levels of self care I've done for 7 years is I'm in the pool 60 to 90 minutes a day. Even when it's 50 degrees out, they keep it warm enough. And I wear a little hat with my glasses. And when it's really cold out at night, I have underwater arm weights. So I pray, I swim, I heal, I integrate. I'm addicted to the pool. So I've taken my addiction genetics and awareness. And I haven't been formally diagnosed with anything, but I would give myself like little traits of hypomania, little OCD, little ADD. Like I'm like a mixture. So I look at my day and look at my qualitative traits, and I have to be at the pool. And I've got all these bathing suits lined up. I also wear jewelry that I've designed. I like have mugs like See the Good. I have
Yeah.
altars. I've got chakra journals for every separate thing I want to manifest. I have a chakra journal for the boring stuff like my bills, it's red. I've got a turquoise one for my creative projects I'm working on. When I go to Hawaii, I have a very special spiritual connection to King Kamehameha. I have a specific chakra journal. So I come fully loaded, like badass Wonder Woman to help others. I'm like ready to rock. I'm like, and once Wonder Woman
There-
gets tired, she needs to rest.
yeah.
Dr. Denise, what would you say in terms of family members who are loving and supporting, someone who is having severe emotional distress, has expressed suicidal thoughts, and they too can, through their love and support for that person, can also begin to feel overtaxed and drained. What advice, in general, would you give for family members?
I would say my one fun statement for all of us is self care is the new cool, always. So if you have a family member that's suffering and they could or could not be getting treatment, you have to have, I would say, loving boundaries. Much like when we kind of said the names of our loved ones that had passed, and then we sort of said thank you, or kind of put that when you're about to go into a conversation with a loved one, and you might know already that they suffer with depression or they tend to complain. Some people are like, oh my gosh, how much can I listen to this? So, like, let's say you're about to call a family member or be at a holiday event coming up, the holidays. A lot of people love the holidays, a lot of people dread the holidays. They can only take certain people in certain doses. And that goes with if you've got a family member that has mental health challenges, even if they're getting incredible help, and a lot of times cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, family therapy. So if the person in the family system is getting the help they need, you still have to pace your interaction. So I think for all of us, you have to have your own holistic health routine. What is your exercise? What is your time in nature? What is your form of meditation and prayer? Are you able to give to others, even if it's a smile or a call? What's your anti inflammatory nutrition? So, whether you're vegan, carnivore, keto, how are you doing anti inflammation, which is the least amount of sugar and processed foods? So, you have to tend to your physical vessel and you have to pace yourself with your interactions, but be loving and kind when you're supporting your relatives with mental health. Because if you're an empath, by the way, everyone has different levels of ability to be empathic towards one another. So whether you like that term or not, I just tend to feel the feeling states of people so intensely that it's as though I'm there again in that moment. And then I use that. I've learned how to guide myself. So if you're an empath and don't even know it, and you've got a family member that wants to kill themselves or is thinking about it, even if they're getting out, you can feel like you're about to die. So my advice is, if your own sensory perception is like high level spidey senses, and you're feeling the feeling states of the loved one, which oftentimes we do when we love someone so much, we have to pace our interactions and we have to keep taking care of ourselves. We have to put our own oxygen mask on first. I think the younger generations get that. I think there's generational overlay of different time periods where being a moral masochist was like championed. Like you do everything to help others, but then you forget about yourself. I think the younger generations, just to give them a compliment, I don't know if it's all the internet stuff. My son, like 7 years, my son's 15 and a half. He's my biggest teacher in my life. He goes, Mom, you really need to care about yourself first. He's like, I think you love me too much. It was so funny. I'm like, how is a 7 or 8 year old? He was telling me this when he was little. He'd be listening to music. He'd turn it off. He's like, no, that is the wrong answer. You are supposed to love yourself. I'm like, oh my God, this kid is so wise. So I think those tips that I just gave kind of help us all through, whether we have a family member that has mental health issues or not. We have to learn how to take care of ourselves. Self-care is the new cool.
It reminded me, Dr. Denise, of in the beginning, you were talking about being in the outer garden, right? But you're also talking about tending our inner garden.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I purposely, almost like metaphorically, did that today to get myself, when you're about to go, when people are about to go on stage and like, dun, 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 I'm getting ready to meet these cool people. Dun, dun, dun. What can I do to show up very happy? What can I do to just really be in this moment? And then I as I was raking, I thought the exact same thing. I'm like, I'm tending to my inner garden. And then before I went out there, I didn't even know I was going to start getting garbage bags. I mean, I went full on. I didn't just rake. I got the big black garbage bags. I had the shovel going. I had the garden gloves. I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get those leaves. And I was literally thinking, I'm so glad Dr. Kaufman stayed alive. I was like taking inventory about what universe I was about to fly into. So I really mind prepped to be the most present I could possibly be in this moment of now. And I would really invite everyone to know their own unique sensory perception, have their own unique way of being their own best friend, have their own unique way of visualizing their cartoon bubble, their own unique way of checking in throughout the day with gratitude, holistic health, learning how to say no, because these are all mental health strengths. So we can then be ready, and if we're in a vibrational frequency that's more flexible and vibrating in gratitude, kindness, and joy, when we get hit with like an emergency or a tough thing, we're better able to not get completely pummeled and knocked off whatever it is, because we're still all having this unbelievable this earth ride on planet Earth is no joke. I mean, it is for the brave souls, I would say.
What you said there about learning to say no, like in my personal life, like I've always said yes. Whenever somebody wanted something from me or they needed my help with something, it was like yes, 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 yes. And I was taking a strain on myself. And I'm sure there's listeners out there who are also Mr. and Mrs. Yes all the time. And recently, and it goes like down to fear. You get scared, because okay, if I say no, what if that person is going to be like, it's gonna be like anger towards me, and there's gonna be like resentment, and I'm gonna get all those funny looks, and then they're gonna talk about me. Or if you're in a job, okay, even job, for example, if I say no, oh no, I might get fired. It's fear. But I've learned now that I say no to certain things, you realize that afterwards, you got so much power in that. Nobody can touch you after that. Nothing really bad is going to happen after that. And who cares what the other person thinks or if I'm going to get fired? It actually does so much for you. On point. Learn to say no. it does a lot for your mental health, for your self-care. It does.
I agree. I love
Our,
what you
no, our
said.
no's can empower our yeses.
Yeah, and empower
So
you.
from an
Become a better
abundance
person.
so from an abundance standpoint, since we're on the metaphor of the garden, the more we know what to say no to, and it's very complex. It's a multidimensional no, because it has to be what age you are, what professional, personal. So you have to get really clear with your own self-awareness of what you want to put your attention and intention to. So I love what Dr. Kaufman just said, because when we say no, then sometimes I have faith in that the yeses that are the hell yes. I'm just being a little bratty because I know that it's like sometimes I use little edgy words to keep people's attention. Like the more we say no, then we get clear on the yeses. So it's actually a frequency. It's a discernment to say no. And I love what you said about fear. The opposite of fear is love. And if we're resonating in our own awareness and self-love, we learn what we should say no to. And sometimes we just have to learn how to politely say no. I think having
Yeah.
qualitative phrases of, oh my gosh, I want to say yes to everything, but I need to take care. I need to do this. Thank you. Thank you for asking. So I think sometimes no, there's different situations and different ways we can maneuver the no. That's a kind no. And then we can also model to others.
Yeah, it may not be an
Yeah.
accident
Like
that the word no, N-O, right, is also a homonym for no, K-N-O-W.
Ah, I love that.
yeah. In my mind right now, like I'm connecting the dots of this whole conversation when you were talking about instincts, So being a human, and if you have a vision for your life, if you want to be somewhere doing something, you need to follow those instincts. So if your instincts is telling you to say no, follow those instincts, because by saying no, it's going to get you a step closer to actually where you want to be. So it's good,
Yes.
to follow your instincts. If you say yes, it's going to lead you astray to where you actually want to be in your life. And then that yes is going to now lead you into that anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts. So follow your instincts. If it's not feeling good for you to say yes, say no. Trust the process, because that no is going to take you to the next level. Trust.
I have a
Another good word.
confession.
Trust.
I have a confession. A third song because I just started doing music, the song lyrics to the third song say, I feel you, I see you, I hear you, I love you. And then it's no, I've got to say no, I've got to say no. And I was in the pool and I got these lyrics and then I sent them to the person that's going to be creating the music. This is for the third song. We're still working on the second song on integrity. But I literally was like, because it was almost like, and then like when you do the story, like Dr. Kaufman shared earlier about the story she did that helped someone to alchemize, I was just thinking like, what are the things I want to drop into songs that could help others? And I think empathy and boundaries are such an important part. So I first had song 1 called Soul Signature, Dr. Nee's Soul Signature, where I dropped awareness, self-love, happiness, really sweet. And then the second song's on being in integrity. What's your in? And then all of it's modeling you have to ask yourself the right questions, like the cartoon bubble. So it's teaching people to have that cognitive dialogue. And how do you lead with the heart? How do you lead with the heart is in that second song. What's your in? And there's going to be a combination of singing, but just questions. So people learn how to not forget who they really are, that we're really like magnificent and we can have our own inner dialogue. And I think that's what's really important. Sometimes and I'm guilty of it, I'm too much on like social media. I even put like a limit to myself. I've got a December goal. And then even before I go into social media or into a situation, I try to mind prep, like tending to the garden. So if you're about to go into your email or about to answer your calls, ask yourself, am I well hydrated? Did I eat my protein? If you know your unique neurostyle gets so focused the minute you go into your computer, you can set a little alarm. I mean, we have to have self-regulation tips, because if we don't have our own tools and we don't know ourselves, and that's when it can get so stressful.
Dr.
True.
Denise, I have a confession to make. I
Okay.
could listen to you forever.
Oh, I was thinking I want to see you guys again. I already thought that 30 minutes ago. I'm like, okay, we're doing a good job. I like these people.
And
like-
I'm
We
sure I
should,
speak
we
for
should really
Tino.
rename the show Confessions of the Therapist. Yeah, no.
We'd love to invite you again, right?
I would
For
love to.
return engagement. Any last words or first words that you'd like to share before we wrap up?
I think I want to start and end with gratitude. And I want to thank you, all of you today on the screen. And then I want to thank any listeners that are hearing us for the first time. And that awareness, self-love, and altruism is the real deal. And if you want to check out anything I'm up to, I'm on Instagram, Dr. Denise MD, DRDENIS MD. I'm on Facebook. I'm on drdenisemd.com. And I'm wishing all of you guys peace, health, and abundance, past, present, and future.